You keep wondering why life makes no sense right now, and the first thing you need to hear is this. Your reactions changed before you noticed. You don't respond the way you used to, and that shift is not a collapse. It's a signal. You feel disconnected from routines that once felt automatic, and that confusion is your mind refusing to repeat versions of you that kept you small. You started noticing details you used to ignore, and every new sensitivity is pushing you away from patterns you outgrew without realizing it. You're not weak for feeling lost. You're overloaded with the weight of an identity that no longer fits. You're not breaking. You're stepping outside the shape you kept for too long. And the reason everything familiar suddenly feels wrong is because your internal baseline is moving faster than your external life. There's a quiet part of you rejecting conversations that drain you, roles that shrink you, and expectations that no longer match who you're becoming. You think you're confused, but what's actually happening is clarity forming underneath the noise. You feel distance where you once felt belonging because you're done pretending those spaces were ever aligned with you. You feel restless in situations you used to tolerate because your tolerance was survival, not connection. You pull back from people who don't know how to meet you, and that withdrawal is not isolation, it's protection. The version of you that made everything make sense is dissolving, and the new version isn't fully stable yet, so your mind is operating between two identities at once. That's why simple things feel heavy. That's why neutral moments feel wrong. That's why your focus slips in ways you can't predict. You're not malfunctioning. You're recalibrating. Every time you feel like you don't recognize yourself, that's the shift trying to surface. Every time your body tightens in places that used to feel normal, that's the old pattern losing its grip. Every moment of discomfort is an internal correction, pushing you toward a reality that fits who you're becoming, not who you were trained to be. And you've already noticed the signs. You avoid people who make you smaller. You feel empty in conversations that once felt safe. You don't chase explanations because something in you knows the truth even before your mind catches up. You no longer force yourself to stay where you quietly suffocate. You no longer apologize for needing space. You no longer pretend the old version of you can carry the weight of what you've lived through. The gap you feel is not failure, it's growth. The confusion you feel is not chaos, it's alignment breaking through resistance. The discomfort you feel is not a warning, it's a transition. And the moment you admit that nothing makes sense is the moment the shift speeds up. You're not supposed to feel stable right now. You're supposed to feel movement. You're supposed to feel pressure where you used to feel numbness. You're supposed to feel the friction of outgrowing the identities that taught you to shrink to survive. This is why your emotions fluctuate without reason. This is why your motivation disappears and returns in unpredictable waves. This is why the things you once loved feel different, not because they changed, but because you're no longer using them to anchor a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. You're stepping into choices you never allowed yourself to consider. You're questioning things you once accepted without thinking. You're sensing the cost of every place where you stayed too long, cared too much, and tolerated too little in return. And the part of you that feels lost is actually the part of you waking up. Slow down for a moment and notice the truth under the confusion. You're no longer fighting to stay the same. You're no longer pretending you're fine. You're no longer forcing yourself into roles that exhaust you. This is the moment where your inner direction starts to override your old habits. You can feel the pull even when you can't name it. You can feel the shift even when you can't explain it. You can feel the ending even when nothing dramatic has happened yet. Something in you is stepping forward, and the rest of your life is trying to catch up. Let yourself notice how your attention moves now. Let yourself notice what drains you instantly. Let yourself notice what your mind refuses to return to. This is not confusion. This is intelligence. This is not collapse. This is release. This is not the end of your sense of self. This is the beginning of the version that finally fits. You keep trying to understand why your life feels disconnected from itself. But the truth is simpler than you think. Your internal pace accelerated, and the rest of your world didn't follow. That mismatch creates a pressure you can't ignore anymore. You wake up feeling like something is off even before your thoughts form. And that's the first sign that you're already shifting. Your instincts changed before your mindset did. Your boundaries tightened before you consciously set them. You react differently because you're not operating from the same identity that carried you through the last few years. You're not unstable. You're evolving. And the moments that feel like emptiness are actually space forming for a direction you haven't taken yet. You pull away from familiar dynamics because your body refuses to play along with patterns you've silently outgrown. You feel irritated by things you used to accept because acceptance was a coping mechanism, not a preference. You feel tired around people who expect the old version of you because meeting their expectations requires shrinking in ways you're no longer capable of. You think you're becoming distant, but what's actually happening is precision. You're filtering everything automatically. Who drains you? What aligns with you? What feels forced? What feels fake? What feels too small? You don't even choose this filter. It's choosing for you. The confusion comes from trying to keep your old logic in a life your new identity refuses to tolerate. You're not confused about what's happening. You're conflicted about letting go of what kept you stable in a past version of yourself. You feel the emotional paradox every day. You want clarity but reject anything that tries to define you too early. You want stability but can't stand the routines that once kept you grounded. You want progress but feel resistance whenever someone tells you to return to who you used to be. That resistance is not fear, it's a boundary. It's the part of you that finally stopped betraying itself. You can feel it in your reactions. You can feel it in your silence. You can feel it in the way you withdraw from conversations that no longer hold meaning. You sense the shift even in small moments. A sudden discomfort with people who speak over you. A quiet irritation when someone dismisses your emotions. An unexpected urge to protect your mental space. These are not random mood swings. These are hidden behavioral signals showing that your inner structure is realigning. You're no longer satisfied with explanations that tell you to stay patient. You're no longer impressed by distractions that used to numb you. You're no longer willing to apologize for taking up space. And even if you pretend nothing is changing, your reactions expose the truth. You hesitate before saying yes to things you would have agreed to instantly. You think longer before sharing parts of yourself with people who haven't earned access. You notice how quickly certain environments drain you. You notice how certain voices tighten your chest. You notice how certain expectations feel impossible because they rely on a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. This is the quiet part of transformation no one talks about. When you don't feel like your old self, but you're not yet comfortable calling yourself your new self. That in-between is where the shift strengthens. It's where confusion becomes clarity. It's where tolerance becomes self-respect. It's where exhaustion becomes refusal. And you're already there. Look at how your focus changed. Look at how your priorities rearranged themselves without you planning it. Look at how your attention refuses to stay where it used to. The things that once calmed you feel flat. The things that once distracted you feel pointless. The things that once defined you feel too tight. Nothing is wrong with you. You're not fading. You're not falling apart. You're stepping out of patterns that were never meant to hold the full weight of who you're becoming. And that's why life feels senseless. The framework you built your identity on is no longer the one guiding you forward. You're shifting from automatic behavior into intentional awareness. And that shift always feels like disorientation at first. But beneath that disorientation is one simple truth. You're not who you were, and you're not supposed to return to that version to make everything feel normal again. The discomfort isn't a problem. It's a direction. You keep trying to force life to make sense again, but nothing clicks because the version of you that understood the old world isn't the one living your life anymore. Your mind is ahead of your circumstances, and that gap feels like chaos even when nothing dramatic is happening. You wake up with a quiet tension you can't explain, as if something inside you is already moving before you have language for it. That feeling is not anxiety. It's awareness. You're noticing things you trained yourself to ignore to stay functional. You're recognizing patterns you once accepted as normal because you didn't have the strength to question them. You're seeing the cost of decisions you made just to make others comfortable. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That's why your old life feels foreign. That's why your old habits feel heavy. That's why conversations that once felt natural now feel forced. Your internal standards changed faster than your behavior, and your emotions are trying to pull you toward alignment before your logic catches up. You're not unstable. You're finally honest. You feel the emotional paradox every day. You want to simplify everything, but the moment you try to shrink yourself back into old roles, something inside you tightens. You want peace, but the silence that used to comfort you now exposes truths you avoided. You want connection, but you can't tolerate giving your attention to people who don't value it. That's not confusion. That's self-protection. You're withdrawing from dynamics that drain you, even if you can't fully articulate why. You pause before saying yes because your tolerance for self-betrayal is gone. You feel irritation faster because your system no longer lets disrespect slide. You stay quiet in conversations where you once over-explained yourself because something in you knows you don't owe that level of access to everyone. These are hidden behavioral signals of a shift that's already in motion. You're not choosing them, they're choosing you. And the more you try to return to your old identity, the more resistance you feel. That resistance isn't fear of change. It's exhaustion from pretending the old version of you was sustainable. You're not losing motivation, you're losing the ability to care about the wrong things. You're not out of energy. You're out of alignment with environments that demand the parts of you you've already outgrown. You're not disappearing. You're detaching from expectations that never matched you in the first place. Look at the subtle signs. You hesitate before responding to people who drain you. You mentally step back from situations that used to pull you in. You stop explaining your feelings to those who don't listen. You feel a quiet certainty that some connections have reached their limit. That is not numbness. That is clarity. Life feels senseless because you're still evaluating it through the lens of someone you no longer are. Your identity is shifting faster than your surroundings adjust, and that creates a temporary mismatch that feels like failure even though it's progress. You think you're falling behind, but what's actually happening is that you're outgrowing the timelines you once used to measure your worth. You think you're breaking down, but what's actually happening is that your nervous system is refusing to repeat cycles that once defined you. You think you're lost, but what's actually happening is that your inner direction is no longer negotiable. This is why your focus is unpredictable. This is why your patience is thin. This is why your emotions fluctuate without warning. They're responding to a version of you that's forming faster than you can stabilize it. You're not doing anything wrong. You're simply becoming someone who can no longer tolerate living on autopilot. And the sooner you stop pressuring yourself to make everything feel normal again, the sooner you'll realize that the nonsense you feel is actually the first clear sign that you've stepped out of your old identity. Nothing is collapsing. Something is emerging. And your confusion is the doorway. You keep thinking something is wrong with you because the world around you hasn't caught up with the shifts happening inside you. But the truth is that your system is updating faster than your life can reorganize. That mismatch creates friction, and that friction feels like your entire reality is out of order. You sense it when you wake up with a heaviness you can't explain. You sense it when familiar routines feel strangely uncomfortable. You sense it when people expect you to react the way you did months ago and you simply can't. Your old instincts are shutting down, and your new ones aren't fully formed, and that gap makes everything feel unstable. But instability isn't the enemy here. It's the indicator. You're noticing things you used to overlook because now they drain you instantly. You're irritated by situations you once tolerated because your tolerance was survival, not alignment. You're stepping back from conversations that once felt harmless because your inner boundaries have strengthened without your permission. These small reactions are not random. They are the behavioral proof that your identity is shifting in real time. And the more you resist that shift, the more exhausted you feel. You're not losing yourself. You're losing your ability to stay in places that require you to pretend. That's why simple tasks feel complicated. That's why old environments feel too loud. That's why relationships built on old versions of you feel unnatural. You're not supposed to fit into them anymore. You've outgrown the emotional architecture they were built on, and your body knows it before your mind accepts it. That's why your chest tightens in situations you once handled easily. That's why your patience disappears without warning. That's why you avoid certain people without thinking. Your system is choosing what protects you before you consciously decide anything. You feel the emotional paradox every day. You want clarity, yet everything that once gave you direction now feels empty. You want stability, yet the routines that once grounded you now feel suffocating. You want connection, yet you can't force yourself to stay close to people who don't understand your shift. None of this is a contradiction. It's alignment. You're not collapsing, you're correcting. You're not confused. You're confronting the truth your old self avoided. You're not falling apart. You're stepping away from expectations that demanded a version of you that no longer exists. Look at the signs. You hesitate before committing to things you once agreed to instantly. You feel drained after interactions that used to energize you. You sense the exact moment a conversation stops being real. You notice when someone talks at you instead of to you. You feel resistance to explaining yourself because you finally recognize who actually listens. These are quiet shifts, but they're powerful enough to change the way you move through the world. And you're feeling that power now. Life seems senseless because you're trying to navigate it with rules that no longer apply to your current identity. Your mind is reorganizing your priorities, values, limits, and focus. And the process feels messy because you're shedding layers you built for survival. You think you're losing motivation, but you're actually losing the desire to participate in anything misaligned. You think you're becoming distant, but you're actually becoming precise about where your energy goes. You think you're breaking down, but you're actually breaking free from the emotional weight you normalized for years. And the reason everything feels intense is because you're finally listening to yourself without distortion. There's no going back to the version of you that stayed quiet to keep the peace. That version dissolved the moment you realized your discomfort wasn't temporary. It was a message. A message that says you're done shrinking. You're done settling. You're done pretending that the old framework still fits. This sense of confusion is the doorway between chapters, and whether you realize it or not, you've already stepped through it. You're not who you were, and that's not a threat. That's the beginning. You keep waiting for everything to suddenly make sense again, but that expectation comes from an older version of you that depended on external stability to feel grounded. You're not that person anymore. Your clarity now comes from what you notice, not from what you're told. And lately you've been noticing everything. The subtle shifts in your reactions, the tension that rises when something isn't right, the immediate drain you feel around people who expect the old version of you to keep showing up. These signals are not disruptions, they're confirmations. They're showing you where you can no longer go back. You feel the internal pull every time you try to force yourself into the spaces you've outgrown. You feel resistance every time you act out patterns that once defined you. You feel the exhaustion every time you pretend you don't see the truth. That's not failure. That's your identity refusing to shrink. You're not supposed to fit the expectations that once shaped your behavior. You're supposed to outgrow them. You're not supposed to tolerate environments that drain you. You're supposed to step out of them. You're not supposed to make sense to people who never paid attention to your inner world. You're supposed to recognize that their confusion is not your responsibility. Look at the emotional paradox you've been living. You feel lost because you're no longer aligned with who you were. But you feel strangely relieved because you no longer want to return to that version anyway. You feel overwhelmed by change, yet you feel calmer when you stop resisting it. You feel disconnected from what you used to love, yet you feel quietly drawn to something you can't name yet. This is what a real shift feels like. Not dramatic, not loud, not cinematic, but precise, undeniable, and often uncomfortable. You're learning to listen to your internal signals instead of overriding them. You're learning to trust the moments when your body reacts before your thoughts do. You're learning to walk away without guilt, to say no without justification, to protect your energy without apologizing. These are not small shifts. These are structural changes, and they're reshaping your entire sense of self. Life feels senseless, not because you're lost, but because your old meaning dissolved before your new meaning formed. You're in the space between, and that space feels disorienting because it's where you stop living on autopilot and start living with awareness. You're not supposed to feel fully stable here. You're supposed to feel movement inside you, like something is reorganizing quietly but unmistakably. And you've already felt it in the moments you almost admitted to yourself that you're done with who you were. You've already felt it in the conversations where your silence said more than your words. You've already felt it in the choices you made recently, without explaining them to anyone. That's the shift. That's the new identity. That's the version of you that doesn't wait for permission to realign. The confusion you're experiencing is simply the mind catching up to what the body already knows. You're stepping into a chapter that requires a different version of you, and that version is already forming. And the moment you stop demanding that your life feel familiar is the moment everything will start to feel true. You're not supposed to understand all of it right now. You're supposed to recognize that the confusion itself is the sign you asked for. Something in you is shifting, and that shift is the reason nothing looks the same anymore. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're moving. Observe what changes next. Tune in, recalibrate, shift your perception,